What's up? This is going to be a quick tutorial on how I mix down a rock indie song, kind of the thought process as well as the tips, tricks, tools that I'm using. First of all, I don't own this song. This is downloaded from Cambridge.mt, Music and Technology segment of Cambridge. And here is the song, the Doppler shift, or by the Doppler shift called Atrophy. That's the one. Epic indie rock is the genre they put. You can come and download these stems if you want. Here's their Facebook page. So I don't own this song. I'm not profiting off of this song. Great band. Check them out. So first of all, the number one thing I recommend is creating a template. So you can actually see this is in my band template. I just never ended up renaming it. This is mostly a template that I have created for this genre. I have a hip-hop trap template. I have like a praise and worship template, more of a metal template, but this is my indie to rock template. And it's a little complicated. It's not as complicated as some others as you see out there. It's a little bit easier to see it laid out in this view, in the tracks view over here. But I have a big drums folder. I have a guitar folder, a keys folder, a Vox folder. So that's a lot more manageable there. But the drums folder is just a basic folder. The Vox folder is a basic folder, and the keys is a basic folder. The guitar is a routing folder. The difference between that is I'm doing drum bus processing on this channel, and this is just a way to close up all the drums. I'm not doing. There's no fader here. There's no processing to do on that channel. I just wanted a quick way to collapse all of my drum tracks because we have, I'll get to this in a minute, a fundamental VCA, a parallel, and a drum verb. And some people put all their effects on the right side, and I used to do that, but it's easier from my head. When I am mixing some drums, I don't want to have to go looking for this verb fader. A lot of the times I've found out as if things are grouped in a way that makes sense to you and your workflow, you're much quicker to make those small changes that add up over time. A routing folder, though, you can do processing. So all of these stems, the guitar stems, go to the guitar routing folder, aux input, bus. They're called different things in different DAWs. So all of these guitars are going through this processing. So you can see I have pretty light processing, just EQ on these guitars. Over here, drums, I have a little bit more processing. There's a little bit more going on. And then this is my drum bus processing. One small thing that I do a little bit differently than some people that I've seen before is the only thing going to my drum bus is my pieces of the drum kit. No parallel compression, no drum verb, and this fundamentals I'll get to. That's all going to my band bus, which is this one over here. And rather than trying to, I'm wanting to glue out of phase. I'm wanting to glue with compression these together, but I've just found that I'm quicker, more efficient in getting the sound that I want, not sending my parallel, my or my drum verb to my drum bus. So let's just get started with drums. My first thing that I want to do, and I've gone back and forth with this over time, EQ, compression, compression, EQ, or high pass, compression, EQ. So right now, kind of where I've landed, and some of it is taken care of because the Pro Q by FabFilter is just so good that a lot of the things that I was trying to maybe emulate with compression EQ or high pass compression EQ, I'm taking care of a lot of that in Pro Q, and then I'm using a different kind of coloring style thing in Slate virtual mix rack. So basic kick EQ, which is kind of this pronounced smiley face. This track also has some really, really high stuff going on over here. So I've actually low passed everything. Every single track has a little bit of this. I can't hear it. It's too high for my ears to be able to hear. But it's there. And those are the things that alias once you have non-linearities in your session, so saturation, compression, those things, even if you can't hear it there, they will bounce around and create things. They will have harmonics of aliases, and there's a lot of great videos out there on that. Dan Worrell is the man to look to for that question. So rather than having some unknowns, because even if I can't hear this, I might hear some of it bouncing back once it hits Nyquist, it's just better for me to high pass and low pass. So I have a pretty low pass in live world. This would be too low, I think. But for in the box studio mixing, this is a pretty fine high pass. And then out of that, I am doing VMR. And this is one thing that I get disagreement with a lot, is I like to use presets. The reason for that is I am not going to know these modules better than the people who made them. So Slate and Fabrice, even though they just got acquired and they're not the top two anymore. Anyways, I digress. They're still going to know these better than me. So that's a starting point. As you can see, this asterisk here, I have made some changes in here. What people have a problem with is like, oh, you're not really doing it. You're using your eyes, not your ears. I'm just going to use both. So this virtual channel, I actually usually end up on the USA, the API, but this is an SSL model for this channel. And really what I've done here is matched my input to output just so I'm not hitting too hard. Let's loop this. And then I'm doing some more EQ here just for some coloring, more EQ. And then this is my primary compressor for my kick channel. It is a pretty aggressive gain reduction, pretty fast attack, not the fastest attack. Actually, it's a pretty slow attack, and pretty slow release. With the stress, it's hit and miss. Not hit and miss. One day I prefer it one way, the other day I prefer it another way. So I have a lower ratio. If I was to crank it up more, you can hear more of that compression happening. But 3-to-1 is kind of where I landed with this. The revival is one of those mix tricks that kind of adds fullness and clarity with the shimmer and the thickness, and in your sessions, a lot of little changes will add up. Some people would like to crank it, and even if it sounds good right there and without any context in isolation, it's not going to stack well every time, but sometimes it does. And then trimmer, I just like to have this here. One of the things that I've heard multiple times that I've tried to do just because it works with my kind of bottom-up mixing philosophy is to not use these faders very much. It is to come in here and use trimmer. This session I did pretty quickly, so I didn't actually spend as much time using this, or Avid has just a trim plugin that a lot of people like to use because it's really lightweight, has phase shift, everything you need. So the rest of my channel is I'm doing some version of Q and VMR. A lot of these are going to look pretty similar. What I've tried to do is to become better with less tools rather than having 1,000 tools that I don't understand the characteristics very well. The only one that I've tried to do a little bit more on was Soothe, to take out some resonances in VMR is bypassed right now. So the other thing that's going on in my drums is this fundamental, and this is a Dan Worrell trick. So essentially what you're doing is you duplicate your kick, snare bottom, and your toms. So it's parallel tracks. You're running them right by each other. They're both being processed, and you can hear them at the same time rather than one going into another. So this is parallel, band filtering trick that Dan Worrell had a video for that I've picked up. Is for these fundamentals, what I'm doing is I'm picking out this fundamental frequency. So if I was to turn this off, if I was to look for my fundamental frequency, it's not always going to be the loudest frequency, but it usually is about the loudest frequency. And you're just going to tune it by ear after that. So I'm sweeping out all of this. So rather than on my primary EQ channel always boosting and boosting and boosting here, that's how you can start to make it sound more like an 808 than an actual kick drum. I come in here and I band pass everything but this kind of fundamental, that kind of thunk, that thud that I want, especially on the snares. So I'm getting more out of my snare bottom today on this one, I think. So yeah, if I was to turn this EQ off, you can see that I ended up with the second loudest frequency peak-wise, but I just kind of tuned that one by ear. So if I was to take those out, it's not going to be a world of difference. Some of that impact, you get that back. It's kind of a combination of subtractive EQ and additive EQ, because you are doubling up a fundamental frequency. There's a pronounced ring on the toms, so I didn't even actually use them. Yeah, it's just it was unusable. My tom fundamentals are not being used in this session. They're there in case I change my mind. And then if we get to my drum bus processing, this is the FG Red. I think this is Chris Lord Algae's mimic of his. And you can see another preset. I think I just changed my threshold a little bit because I don't want a bunch of gain reduction here. I just want some slight glue. And then this is a plugin from Plugin Alliance. This is the mid-side version. I'm not processing them too different, if different at all, actually. So a drum bus start that I tweaked a little bit. And this is just going to add some harmonics, I think it's going to be even and odd harmonics. My parallel bus. Just a super squashed drum crusher. The Monster, that's their extreme dynamic processor. There's a lot going behind the scenes here. So this is just getting smashed, and that's just gets to add some of that aggression back in. I am doing a little bit narrower of a range being heard here. It's not pleasant to my ears. Get cymbals in this wash, or the beater hit attacks here. It's just not usually pleasant to my ear, so I kind of like this range for my parallel. And then my drum verb. Put that down a little bit. This is again, to my ears, reverb on lows just doesn't sound very good. I'm usually in the 150 to 200 mark here. However, I do like some of that brightness in my reverb here, so then I'm just using another plugin by Slate. This is just a plate reverb style. My drums, it depends on the session. This one is a really tight, the band, it's a good recording, so I'm not needing to fill as much space necessarily, so this one I'm using a little bit in all AB here. No fundamentals, no verb, and no parallel. Sounds fine. It's not a bad sounding kit. Really start to bring in some of that aggression in the fundamentals. This gets a little bit thicker, especially on the kick. Add some of that verb back in there. Processing, a little bit extra, so it sounds good. I'm not completely happy with this. This is more of a wanting. There's a balance between perfection and completion, and this is one of those that I tried to push myself to complete in a much narrower mix window, because projects, client demands are always going to be different. So that's my drums. One thing I like to do with my bass is I double up, just like kind of like what I'm doing over here. I have my primary bass, and then I will also reamp it in this. I think this is a plugin alliance one. Yeah, this is just in one of the SVTR classic modules that I ended up liking this one. A little bit more. It has some more air. It is emulating a cabinet, which I think is where I'm getting that sound back from. I'm actually only using this reamped one. I'm not completely destroying the recorded tone, unless I have latitude to do it. I generally try not to change the tonality of drums. Drums is a little bit different because it's atonal. It's not, you can tune it to a specific frequency, but it's not like a bass has specific tone. So tonal instruments, guitars, bass especially, I don't want to change the tone of it very much. So if I was to bypass this, some of the throat that I'm wanting back, and some of the air of having a cabinet, I'm just more pleased with how this sounds, but I still feel like I'm getting the characteristics of the original bass recording. So if I was to do kick and drums and bass, this project I did not do a sidechain on my bass. Having the kick duck it. I don't always do that with rock. You can't get away with it as easily. I know a lot of people will say use sidechain, and it does carve out some space, but I felt like with how everything sat, I didn't need it in this session nearly as much. So I'll collapse this. That's my bass. So now if I go to guitars, it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 takes. This last one's stereo, so I actually don't know why they did this one this way. And I chose not to rebalance this gain. It's just my left channel is a lot brighter or louder than my right channel, which these other ones, they are different recordings, but they are level matched pretty well. I don't know if these are completely different takes or what they necessarily did with those, but where's my playhead? So if I go back to here, this is kind of this is the verse, and I'm really satisfied with this tone. There's some sparkle, so you can see there's some of that low or the high end stuff, and then I didn't need to high pass, which I prefer not to high pass if I don't have to. In live world, you want to high pass everything every time. In studio world, I'm a little bit less inclined to high pass every single thing if I don't feel like I need it. As you can see, especially this part right here, we're having no significant peaks here. Then when we get to kind of the chunkier segment here, nope. With these I hard pan left and right, and these two, this one and this one, I hard pan left and right, and then this third one of this kind of driving section I left in the center. Satisfied with the tone there. Don't really need to do anything. I think I just duplicated this EQ on all of them just to kind of narrow it a little bit. Then what I'm doing is I really like this Neutron module called Sculptor. It is one of those kind of automatic EQ type things, and for this I was pretty satisfied. I did narrow the processing on the lows and the highs because I really like that throaty mids, just to make it a lot more aggressive. You can hear I'm getting back more lows, losing some highs. I think that the algorithm is just going to tell it to scoop some highs out for vocals. Then on here, I'm doing a multi-band compressor. I'm not a huge fan of multi-band compressors, generally because I feel like they take longer to dial in than I feel like I'm able to get it to be worth it. But This preset here I've used hundreds of times, and I really like this on guitars in general, because this is more the style I mix with this kind of indie rock, as well as like praise and worship, contemporary worship music with guitars that are overdriven. I have a lot of luck with this one, so I'll bypass this. It can be less controlled. I like what I get with that. And then I'm doing the CLA blue preset here. Light reduction, slower release, faster attack. Because I do want it to kind of add aggression to those peaks, but I don't want it to completely smash them. And guitars, bass, and drums. Goes left and right and center. That's just taking up a lot of space. It sounds really good. If I was to get to keys, there's some sessions like this that they just go way, way, way overboard in my opinion on these kind of synthy stuff, but this one, especially this kind of intro section, sounds really nice. It's like an atmosphere-y type preset. Atmosphere is just a synth keys plugin. The synth keys plugin, I should say. It's kind of ethereal, not really doing much processing to those. And then here we have this kind of E-piano sound, Rhodesy type sound. And I think I can just barely pick this out. I think I buried it enough here that I can barely pick it out. And this E-piano again, and then when we get to the more crunchy sections, we do have this again. This is kind of the lower bridge. So we have some synth and some more staccatoed E-piano. Processing for this, I sometimes will do a routing folder to do processing on the bus here, but I didn't feel like I needed to contain it very much. Things weren't popping way out of control or anything. The only one I did, this synth, I'm using Soothe 2 to get rid of some of these resonances. You might not be able to hear very much of that. I think it might have been for the intro section that I was doing it for, actually. Yeah, I can hear a little bit more of it popping through there. So that's just kind of a safety net for really ethereal, like more pad-oriented keys. Just helps make sure those resonances don't build up. So then here is everything kind of coming in at the same time here. E-piano is hard pan left and right as a stereo channel, but it's sitting in the middle. It almost feels like a mono type track. So between these two hard pan guitars, it's sitting really nicely with the vocal. So now if we do the vocal, this is a great vocal take. One thing I will say, I get some sessions that there's one of the practice ones I had downloaded that, yeah, just a ton, and another one that I was working on. Just so many 21 vocal takes. That's fine. I have nothing against a lot of vocal takes, but more is not always more with those things, and there's kind of the give and take of the mixing engineer to feel like they have to get every take in, because sometimes it's the bass player who never gets to sing but wants to hear his voice in an album or whatever. Arbitrary example. If you don't get it in there, sometimes feelings can get hurt. So the nice thing about a very, very good take like this is I can focus on one sound to make sure that one sound really, really fits with the mix, especially if I have a deadline. Fewer vocal tracks generally ends up with a better result if the vocalist has chops, which this guy does. As I perish inside, take off all my extra processing. And I cannot decide. I'm really not doing very much. What it is to be alive. Narrowing my range. This one can definitely go up. And then this is a plugin from Oeksound Soothe. This is just a channel strip, and this is another one that I kind of always default to. I'm not. It has preamp tape. I mean, you can read all these. The things I really like about this is this auto meter. You know which one you hover over. Limiter built in. It has reverb and delay built in. I'm not using those because it depends on if it's like 7 total stems. I might use this for space and delay, but I much more prefer in a project that's a little bit more involved to have fader level control over delay and verb rather than having to go into a plugin to find it. Bypass. I cannot control the input and output command. A bit more aggressive. I mean, it is adding a little bit of volume there, so it's kind of like that volume bias. It's louder, so it's better. That lie on the brain that once lived but long since atrophied as I perish inside. Everyone else seems then to I am relaying. I have this relay plugin by iZotope. This essentially allows inter-plugin communication to take place. I didn't end up using it. Actually, I used a different sidechain method, but I left it there just in case I changed my mind. And then my vocal bus. This template has a vocal bus. If I would have built this from scratch, I wouldn't have done a vocal bus necessarily because I only have one. Usually, if I need to sum multiple vocals together, that's when I use a vocal bus. But this is another one of the single vocal enhancement. I actually chose this plugin. I had not used it before, but I was pretty happy with it. I need to change my thresholds a little bit. And then I'm this BlackBox again. This is not the mid-side mode. This is just the normal mono mode. Just adding a little bit. Preset is area vocal. And then one thing I didn't mention on all of my routing folders, my summing buses, I have just a safety limiter in place. Bus control is the preset, and then I kind of change it. I usually end up around -3.5 for vocal bus, just to be absolutely safe. No gain, conservative controls, so it's not really coloring. It's really not doing much except for making sure by the time I get to my mix bus and my master outputs that I'm not having 7 routing folders that are peaking. A lot of that is done in the mixing phase as well, but I prefer to set myself up for success going into the fine-tuning mixing phase. My verb and delay, I am sending in series, but it is acting in parallel. In series just meaning one and then the other, but it's not necessarily feeding into each other. These are being sent in parallel to each other, and then all of it is being sent back to my mix bus. In my vocal side, I'll get to that in a second. One thing I do like to do is to hit my delay and then have my delay spill back into my verb. So if I was just to do my verb, and into myself, I crawl into myself, I crawl into myself. Pretty pleasant sound. I love NeoVerb. I usually will start. Short plates are generally my favorite for this style, unless I'm trying to get a really ethereal, more ambient, which this plugin can do it. And I really do like the assistance in the iZotope plugins. If I just feel like I'm stuck on something, I'll just hit that and kind of fine tune it, or just if I don't like it, I'll start over. But I didn't need to do it with this one because it was just one. I felt like the short plate got me close, and I was able to kind of dial it in a little bit more. This plugin just makes it really, really easy to sound natural, and it's just a really low, lightweight plugin. You can see down here, I'm adding 5 milliseconds of delay with it, which is, you can get very, very long, depending on if you're using impulse response based that to make you sound like you're in Sydney Opera Hall or whatever crazy reverb you want to sound like. So I really like this for vocals. I like it for everything, really, but for vocals especially. And then my delay is a FabFilter one. I like it because I feel like a lot of these, so an example would be, where is it? It's just not stereo channels. Yeah. This repeater is a good one, but I think that in the effort to emulate a analog piece of gear, it's a little bit harder to use. So if you have this interface or this interface, it's just, although the result is the same, the entire philosophy of GUI and everything is built on, for this Timeless by FabFilter, I'm positive what all is kind of happening because I can see it happen.
It is just not enough.
Whereas over here, you just have a few controls and you have to use your ears. And I'm a huge proponent of using both. So FabFilter, their design philosophy is to get you to have a clean user interface, to have results quickly. Not saying you can't get good sound out of this, not saying that this is not useful. As a guitar player for the last 20 years, this makes sense to me. What's going on here, these knobs and buttons and switches makes sense to me. It's not that it's too confusing. I just, when I'm approaching delay, especially vocal delay, I just want to make sure that things aren't conflicting, that it's really clean, it's really simple, and Timeless gets me there. So if I was to just do delay,
That's not enough. Into myself, I crawl into myself. I crawl into my.
really nice, doing a little bit of drive on the first couple hits, and then I am making it a little narrow. And then this is a ducking preset I usually will use just because it's easier to get the ducking all set up with the preset rather than having to go in and do it. Because when he's singing, I want to make sure my delays are a little bit quieter, that they're ducked just a hair, rather than vocal when he's singing really pushing in this section. I don't want all my delays to be the same volume. You can hear between the just not enough. He stops singing, it increases in volume. Really nice plugin, really like that one. So then that delay that spills back over into my reverb. So with this send, it's a lower send because I don't want my reverb to get too washy, because if I send more delay to it, it's more sonic. There's more of the initial reverb, the singing goes to the reverb, and then every other hit of the delay goes to the reverb as well. You can get washy quick. That again. I have found that it's best to really dial in that to effects while it's the most pushed vocal section. I was to disable this.
Just not enough. Just not enough.
It is fine either way, and in a mix you probably can't hear the difference too much. But what I want to be able to hear some of those delay hits, but I don't want someone to be able to necessarily pick it out and hear that kind of like echo. Because for some people it's distracting, and it's just generally the sound that I prefer. So this is the entire mix.
Into myself, I crawl into myself.
What's happening?
I crawl into myself.
I think I just have a effect soloed somewhere.
It's time to look back. It's time to forget.
What?
Time to get checked out at Surba. To be alive. To myself, living is just not enough. Just not enough.
That's hilarious. I'm an idiot.
Into myself, I crawl into myself. I crawl into myself. Living just not enough. Just not enough.
Okay, the next thing a couple things that's going on, you can see up here every once in a while that you start to have that kind of like tube glow. That's heat. It's this plugin built into Pro Tools. To drive to the right adds even harmonics, and drive to the left adds odd harmonics. So odd would be like a tape sim, whereas even would be more like a nonlinearity you get from like a bus compressor, an analog bus compressor. Can get out of control really quick. You can see if I loop kind of those bigger sections again. Subtle process, and then to the left on tone is darkens it, and then to the right brightens it. So this, you can see it's in clicks. So you only have 3 clicks. It's not Drive has more, I suppose, but it's not really like a typical knob. It just has your clicks. Bypass it. Probably can't hear the difference, but again, it's one of those kind of you can bypass it per channel if you don't like how it sounds. So the next thing I'm doing is, this is a trick that I learned a long time ago, and I have been critiqued to my face about it, that this is just not kind of a true way of mixing, that this is kind of a crutch way to do it. But I don't care, because it helps me get the results that I want. So you can see over here, all of my instruments are going to a band bus. So all my drums, my drum bus, my drum verb and parallel, all of my guitars, synth, all hits a band bus. And then vocals goes to my mix bus. And you can see this plus, it's also going to my vocal side chain. I'll get to that in a second. So that means every instrument, everything in the band minus vocals hits my band bus. And then I have vocals going to this mix bus. So that way, the thing that I have found was that in bottom-up mixing, meaning that you're starting with the channel level, kind of working your way up to the bus level, I always started with drums, and probably because I've been a live audio engineer for so long that my channel 1 is your kick. And I've tried a few times to have vocals far left in my channel, start with vocals, and the rhythm didn't feel right to me. With practice I could, but with deadlines and speed being something that is prioritized most of the time, I just didn't feel like I got into a groove. So that almost always I have drums, bass, guitars, keys, synth, vocals. And by the time I got to vocals, I almost always felt like I just had to jack their volume. This is when I was first starting out. I had to jack their volume to be able to get my vocals to sit on top. Well, this way, without having to go back and turn down all of these faders, if I'm happy with this mix, by the time I get to the vocals, I don't want to mess with this. I just want the ability to maybe duck it just a little bit. If I mute my vocals, all you hear is band. This band bus goes to my mix bus. Vocals also go to my mix bus. So I'm able to process this band bus as one, and then before it hits my mix bus, which I'm processing again. So you just, in this kind of setup, you have to be careful that you're not overdoing it. You can kind of see this big section again. This limit meter over here is not doing anything. I, at this stage, should not be doing too much compression. So you can see on this is a mix bus channel. It's not necessarily a compressor. This is the only compressor on here, and it is doing a lot, but the mix is low. If I was to push things up into this, or if I was to lower my threshold for my compression in here, you would start to see more of this gain reduction. So you can see over here, gain reduction. But one of my favorite kind of tools is this unmask. And this is what my vocal sidechain is doing. So I don't have a vocal sidechain channel. You can't see it over here. I could if I wanted to do other processing with it before it hits this. But one of my favorite things about Pro Tools is in your output section, you just hold Control on a Mac, and you can add it to different outputs. So I'm just parallel sending it to my vocal side mono bus that exists behind the scenes. It's not a channel that you can see out here. And then I am keying, side chaining that into this. So with this vocal, or this, it's not only a vocal unmask, it's just an unmask plugin. All my vocals are the purple, behind it is my band bus. So this is on my band bus. Making a lot of room for my vocals. What was it, on 7%? It's barely doing anything. I just want to make sure my vocals come in. I'm not having to run around do a bunch of volume automation, which I still do at times. But if it's a consistent, it's a good vocal, look, just barely dipping. I can also narrow the bands. I don't need any of this information. This doesn't matter to me at all. As well as in this project, that high-end nonsense. Just want to make sure I wasn't having that affect volume anymore. So then sensitivity determines the level of masking at which processing begins. Attack and release, same as always. So as soon as he starts singing, how quickly do you want it to take effect? How quickly do you want it to release? So that's also why I'm sending my wet buses to this as well, because I want some of that trail to affect the volume. I don't want, as soon as the vocal, primary vocal, without wet processing, as soon as that's done, I don't want my volume to immediately ramp up. That's it, dramatic. It's ducking a hair and then releases it and goes back up a hair. I want to make sure I'm leaving room for some of that wet tail to have space in my mix, because that is one of the most pleasant sounding things, is a good, well-tuned vocal reverb and delay. Stopped singing, it immediately went back up, and I don't want it to do that. So this is around 7. This is around 100. I want a slow attack, slow release. I want it to sound natural. I don't want it to sound like an effect that I'm doing. I don't want someone to be able to pick out that this process is happening. So let's just listen to another section again. And then a safety limiter here, -2, no gain, very slow acting, not cutting color my track at all. This is a nonlinearity. It is going to affect the tonality somewhat. It has to by nature if it's enabled, and if it's hitting that threshold or hitting the limiter at all, it's going to add some sort of color, some sort of sonic change. But I don't want hardly any at that phase. I want to make sure by the time I get to this mix bus, I have a fairly well curtailed mix that is more manageable. My primary goal is to need to turn up my final maximizer limiter. So I have 7 dBs of gain here. Again, we'll get to that in a second. So then that and my vocals spill into my mix bus, output of this to mix bus, and output of vocals to mix bus. So then I have another instance of this VMR mix bus fat preset that I adjusted. After that, I have a limiter doing more limiting. I'm going to do some gain reduction here, light reduction, a little bit more of this XL setting. Instance of this mid side, so this gives me a last chance to add any width. Added some of those harmonics in. Then I get to my master. that's where I'm doing this master start, Steven Slate's mastering start. And this is very, very light processing. It's barely doing anything at all, if anything. This is just kind of that last glue step. And it hits my limiter. So that's how quiet my mix is. -18, -20 for a limiter. And that's not saying that at every phase I'm limiting and smashing down stuff. So by the time I get to my master out, I have no volume because the amplitude is so narrowed that I have no volume at all. No, it's a good mix. A well-balanced mix. I have the headroom to add, what was that, 7? Go down a little bit because I am hitting my ceiling a little bit. But, I mean, so limiting, you don't want very much gain reduction on your last step. So you have like the actual best practice as well as what my ears are telling me. And this gain reduction is so light, and this true peak limiter by Plugin Alliance is so good that it doesn't color your sound. I'm not getting artifacts, that I'm not necessarily as worried about that. I mean, that was probably the loudest moment of the song. A band full in and the guy yelling. Getting 1 or 2 dBs of reduction, that's fine. Get away from me. Actually, we're going to do like 1.5. I just don't want my intersample peaks to be an issue here. And the Youlean meter. I've used all the meters. Youlean is my favorite because you can export this loudness report. And I like to be able to do that for clients. That's just a nice thing. I don't have a preset in here. All I'm doing is I'm looking for this loudness. And that'll be it. So if I was to A/B all of my processing, let's see. Yeah. No, I didn't want it. Inactive. Dang it. Sweet. I'm really good at this, can you tell? Oh, bypass. That one doesn't matter, it's just my relay plugin. And then this is the most basic entry level. Not much happening. Listen to the bridge yet. Not super happy with that for Tom 3 floor tom lowest floor really love about this mix so far is I'm not super happy with the aggression being brought in by this parallel. I would probably come in here and either narrow my EQ a little bit. I like how my drum verb is popping through my mix. I'm not super happy with the fundamentals boost, those bandpass fundamentals, but some of that is just the ring I'm getting from the toms. I feel like I'm really missing some chunk from those toms. As well as the guitars, I would come back and add a little bit of a cut to make a little bit more room for the vocals. I might even do this unmask on this guitar channel. So stack it so the guitars are being the vocals are being unmasked in the guitar bus before it gets sent to the other bus, which does a little bit more unmasking. But ask me tomorrow if I was to put on headphones and do this, I would have different perspectives. The other thing that I'm not super loving is I don't have a very good mix of these. I spent the least amount of time on these, and depending on the client's wants, needs, I would maybe need to circle back and mix those in better. So, but that's it. That is my mix down of this epic indie rock album.